Welcome to our third Thursday presentation, our workshop series. Our workshop tonight is Rural Perspective on Water, and we're very excited for the presentations this evening. I wanted to welcome you. If you just joined us and you didn't hear my spiel before, please place your questions in the chat and I will be compiling those for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. We ask that you please keep yourself muted during the presentation so that everyone can clearly hear what our presenters have to say. And take a moment to read our land acknowledgement. The Water Advocates' main activism areas are located on the traditional homelands of the Southern Tiwa, pueblos of Cochiti, Santo Domingo, San Felipe, Santa Ana, Sandia, and Isleta, the original peoples of New Mexico, Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache, since time immemorial, have deep connections to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community statewide. We honor the land itself and those who remain stewards of this land throughout the generations, and also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples. We gratefully recognize our history. All right, I am going to turn the program over to Norm to introduce our presenters this evening.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to our third Thursday evening workshop for March. We're very pleased to have the dream team who can tell us about the challenges that rural people, the rural population of New Mexico faces with regard both to their infrastructure needs, the sustainability of their systems, the problems, the unique problems they face, and the help that they need. Bianca surgeon works with the Rural Assistance Corporation and as an expert in this area, has been working in it for a long time. Andrew Erdman recently joined the New Mexico Environment Department in a policy level position dedicated to helping rural water systems regionalize and a lot more. And Bill Connor is the executive director of the New Mexico Rural Water Association and served as a member of the Water Policy and Infrastructure Task Force in 2022. So with that introduction, I'm going to ask them briefly to introduce themselves, tell you why you should trust what they have to say, and then get into our substantive program for this evening. Again, please place your questions in the chat. We will curate those and ask those in at least 20 minutes reserved at the end for questions and answers. Also, at the end, I'm going to give a brief cap of where I see the legislative appropriations and bills ending up, and ask you to stay tuned with the Water Advocates because I think we have a very busy year ahead of us in 2025. So thank you, panel, and Bianca, I believe you are going to be the one to first take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Norm. And thank you, everyone. It's great to see a lot of faces, a lot of familiar faces. Wonderful. So Bianca Surgeon, I work with Rural Community Assistance Corporation, where we are a nonprofit. And I have been in communities doing the work this is my 30th year. I started in September 1995. So can you believe it? I'm going to have a great big anniversary here pretty soon. So I am so glad to have been working with so many small communities and continue to do so. Thank you for the invite, Norm.
Thank you. Andrew?
Good evening, everybody. Equally excited as Bianca is to visit with you all this evening. I come into this conversation after some 30 years of being a federal hydrologist, working for Department of Interior agencies, the last 20 with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's National Wildlife Refuge System. So I have a national perspective, but I see, as I start to understand the drinking water components, it's a whole other universe than the environmental flows work that I did a lot in my past federal career. That the whole nation is at this point of transition towards something, hopefully that's going to be more sustainable, because the challenges are only getting more and more immense in front of us, whether it's the increased regulations to keep our water safe, or it's the reactions to drought and climate change. The work is getting nothing but more difficult. So I really want to be an agent for assisting our wonderful New Mexican communities to forge their own path forward, to find the right combination of tools to prepare our citizens for what's coming.
Thanks, Andrew. And Bill has been in this business a long time. It has been, I understand, his career. So, Bill, please introduce yourselves to our audience.
Thank you, Norm. Hi, folks. Glad you're here tonight. My name is Bill Connor. I'm Executive Director of New Mexico Rural Water Association. New Mexico Rural Water Association, if any of you are not familiar with us, was founded in 1978. We're in our 47th year of providing training and technical assistance to small and rural water and wastewater systems throughout New Mexico. I haven't been there that long, but we've been pounding this together a long time. My staff has several hundred years combined experience in the water and wastewater industry. So we've been dealing with it a long time. We continue to work with the small and rural water systems. It's our purpose for existence. Thank you for being here this evening.
All right. Well, let's get into our program.
That looks good. Thanks, Norm.
All right. I'll get us started with a little bit of perspective on the history of small communities, small drinking water providers. And New Mexico, really, we should be very, very proud, and we are, of our state, because in 1947, New Mexico legislature passed the Sanitary Projects Act. The Sanitary Projects Act created the mutual domestics that we hear so much about, right? It's like there is mutual domestics that were incorporated in 1947, the year that the act passed. They right away, they were ready, right? And it's like 47, 49, in Taos in the north, I have seen some, that started right away after the act was approved. And the act said that 10 families or more could form a mutual domestic water association. So keep that in mind, that 10 families or more. There is in some places very little growth, but in some places when 10 families in one community created one, and maybe a mile another 10 families, but then they grew. So now there's several mutual domestics that are very near each other. And at that time they weren't, but now they are. Hi, Maria. And then the reason why New Mexico responded to this and created the Sanitary Projects Act was there was a lot of infant mortality and waterborne diseases, because people were used to going to the acequias, right, or the streams, and with a bucket and go get water. And that's where drinking water was coming from, thinking that it was clean. But then there was all this waterborne diseases. And so people were waiting to create this, water systems that will connect multiple families. And the way the state did it is like they passed the act, but they also fund it. They passed funding with it. And it's beautiful to see the history, because it said that the state think about it. This is 1947, right? The state would provide up to $12,000 for the well, the pump, and the pipe. So they came in with that. And then the citizens, the local citizens, they would provide the ditching, the adobes for the construction of the well house, and the labor. And we have in Mora, we found communities that had clay pipes too. It was like if there wasn't enough, people got creative and, you know, put the pipes, a lot of lead pipes at that time too. Not lead, but metal, right? But now they're PVC, right? But at that time it was different. And then also I should mention that USDA was not called USDA at that time, but it was the Old Farmers Home Administration. They came in at that time also when New Mexico passed this act, and FMHA came in and they would also bring the materials and they will bring the engineering, some of the engineering, and they help build some of the wells. And basically they told the community, okay, everybody celebrated, they got a well, they got the pipe for the families, and, you know, charge for electricity and we'll see you. And the water was great. It was, you know, safe to drink, and changes started happening. You know, the mortality rates went down, and more mutual domestics got formed, and people then started connected. You know, there was water inside the houses. You didn't have to hold water anymore. And then things went really well. The legislature continued to fund these projects. And there were communities that every year went in to either add more pipe or after so many years to get maintenance money to either change the pump in the wells or, you know, change the well house. And it was constant legislative funding that was provided to the mutual domestics. And local engineers in some regions started being the project managers of those projects. And they also helped go to the legislature and write the proposals and manage the money and the projects. And the projects were maintained using legislative funds where the communities pay for electricity, and that was it. So there was, you know, there was not the cost, and then it was run by volunteers, right? Volunteers did everything, and there was no cost of regulations at that time. Think about it this time. In 1973, there is a study, a report that went to the legislature that started evaluating, and it said that the rising cost of construction, you think about it, 73, right? Materials and all of that was changing. $12,000 was not enough to build the whole system anymore. And then also the local people, right? In 73, people were starting to work somewhere else. And there were problems then with, you know, O&M, because the systems by that time needed more maintenance and operations. And so think about from 73, then later on, there's been all these reports of how things change. Now let's look at the national perspective, right? The Safe Drinking Water Act came in 1974. So New Mexico already had the Sanitary Projects Act in 47 and even had a report kind of, you know, changing things at the legislature in 73. In 74, the Safe Drinking Water Act says, you know, authorizes the EPA. EPA is born to provide the national standards for drinking water. The EPA then also regulates, and it says that 15 service connections or 25 people for 60 days out of the year is a public water system. Now, remember that New Mexico said a mutual domestic is 10 families. And New Mexico still has that. We still have mutual domestics or small water systems that are not public water systems because they don't have the 15 connections, but they're still go to the legislature to look for funding. USDA also still continued to fund those very small 10 families. The EPA, the Safe Drinking Water Act was amended in 1986. And in 86, the amendments were very regulatory. That's when, and some regulations were pretty good. It was like prohibited the use of lead pipes and any lead since 86, started prohibiting that. There was wellhead protection at that point, right? It's like wellhead protection. Don't put any septics very close to the wells or any other things that could contaminate the wells. And it delegated, at that time, tribal communities were treated as a state. They have their own primacy. They're not part of the state of New Mexico. They're individual. They have their own regulations, and they go directly to EPA. Those were some of the changes in there. In filtration. Filtration started at that time with wellhead protection. So now we're talking about adding some chlorine or chlorination and to the water systems, right? If there was any problems with regulations. So think about in 86, some costs start being added, right? To the cost of building the infrastructure. So more costs, more regulations. In 96, this Safe Drinking Water Act gets amended also. And at that time, it provides flexibility because rural communities start falling behind those regulations. They can't afford it. They're not used to having all this structure. And so then the act gets amended, but more regulations get added. So keep all that in mind, right? There's like how the progression of regulation and what does that do to our small systems? By that time in New Mexico, we have about, how many do you think? Look at the map. There is small systems all over the state. There is a few large ones. You can see around cities and all that, those systems grew, but the whole state basically has safe drinking water. And let's look at the numbers in there. Let's go to the next slide, Norm. So the numbers in New Mexico and some other states you can imagine, but in New Mexico, we have about 650 public water systems, and over 500 of them have less than 500 connections. Because remember, we're talking about 10 families, 10 connections makes a small water system, right? And many of them, and many of you are in the room today, are even less than 100 connections. Many, probably 300 or so. And then, getting to the larger systems, you can see there is the cities. We can count them, right? But 96% of the systems have less than 3,000 connections, and we should keep that 84% are less than 500. So we still have the size of the small systems with thinking about water quality changing, cost of materials, right? The regulations say that no longer communities can build their own systems like it was in the past, right? Here is, I remember even when the legislature gave monies and communities themselves did the work. That changed after 96. That started changing. It's like you can't be, drilling your own wells yourself and all that. So the cost of building a water system change. So keep that in mind too, and then the contaminants, right? The contaminants, water gets contaminated because the population grow and small communities are on septics mostly, right? Most of small communities are on septics. So there is the contaminants there. The volunteers. So let's think about when the Sanitary Projects Act was approved. It says, they can have a volunteer board, and the volunteer boards used to live in the community and used to work in the community. So what happened is at that point, volunteers, that life changes, right? Since 2000 or so, we start seeing a decline in the volunteers board, or some of you who are board members probably see that, you get in the board and it's like, you're a member for life in the board. So because now people live in rural communities, you don't have the economies there to go to work. You have to go, some people commute 2 hours each way to go to work. So can you imagine then coming in or spending your Saturday? It's very hard. Many of you are board members here, and you probably understand how the whole thing about, with the difference in regulations, the funding requirements, and, the population growing in communities, and then also the contaminants that are in water, and also not only water quality issues, but quantity issues sometimes. It brings a lot. You have to be planning, long-term planning. And when do you do that when you're so busy doing the day-to-day operations? And at the same time, keeping the systems affordable, right? The water rates affordable for the people in that community. So resiliency issues and being prepared for any emergencies or prepare for any changes. It could be natural, or it could be, something happened and we didn't see it. It's taxing the board members. And really we need to find a different solution. I think if you agree with me on that, we'll discuss some solutions later. So, but and the state of New Mexico has been looking for solutions, right? How do we solve these issues that are pretty big, that work in the past but are not, not working because things have changed around us. And Bill will talk to us about what the state has been doing, and to bring up some solutions. So I'll pass it on to Bill.
Norm, can you change the presenter mode? We can see, it's hard to see the screen at the mode you have it in. We can see the notes and all the slides at the bottom.
Oh,
And I'll just note that it was showing fine about 5 minutes ago, and so something changed.
Still showing in presenter mode. Still showing in presenter mode. Sorry, all. Thank you for bearing with us while we deal with some technical difficulties here. I think you have to end the slideshow and go back to start at this slide. Play from current slide, the second button from the left. That's still taking us to that presenter mode. There we go. That worked. Thank you.
Yay.
All right, fine work. Thank you. At any rate, Norman asked me to visit a little bit about Water Task Force recommendations and how the Water Task Force worked a little bit. So we'll go through that. I'm not gonna hopefully bore you too much on it, but I want to whip down through it a little bit so you'll understand what they did. If we can get the next slide, please. Back in 1922, the governor authorized the state engineer to form a water policy and infrastructure task force. And so what he did is he put together an executive committee consisting of himself and three other agency heads and another 25 folks, including Norm and I from around the state, and a very varied group of water backgrounds and interests. to work together on this. And we spent the, oh gosh, spring and summer and most of the fall, I think, of 2022 meeting and going over uh, these things, and we'll just kind of take a look at what we talked about and came up with. Originally, core problems that were identified was water supply, state government capacity, community capacity, and watersheds and aquifers at risk. And the water supply is just basically um, goes back to the amount of use, the number of people that are utilizing water in businesses, and uh, versus the amount of water that's available to be used within the system from our rivers and groundwater and fluctuating and over a period of time depleting uh, sources of water. Government capacity is the uh, ability of the state agencies to work with the communities and uh, and the systems and to uh, help them not only regulate them, but to help them be better stewards and do a good job of what they're doing. And that covers everything from funding uh, to regulation to technical assistance for the whole realm of helping these small and rural water systems and wastewater systems and the tribal systems operate in a safe, uh, sustainable way. Community capacity is again getting back to the technical and training and technical assistance that's provided to communities to help them maintain what they're doing. And watersheds and aquifers are what do we need to do to protect our watersheds, protect our aquifers, and keep them uh, uh, safe so they'll continue to provide safe water to our rivers and ground sources. Um, Areas that need solutions are capacity, capacity of the agencies uh, to be able to keep up with what they're supposed to be doing, as well as to help systems. Uh, funding, uh, funding is always an issue. We've talked about that some. Um, uh, Bianca did a little bit. It's a limited amount of dollars and a whole lot of demand out there. Science, data planning, that's hydrogeologic uh, research and aquifer research to maintain and monitor what's really going on with our water systems and our water supply. Um, Community engagement is just working with communities uh, to help them determine how to best help themselves. Solutions, good lasting solutions can't be imposed from above. They have to uh, come from working with the communities and uh, and grow from the bottom up. And water conservation just simply we all need to use less water. Uh, there's a growing demand and a finite amount of water available. Key recommendations. The task force was split into three groups, and those three groups came back with recommendations uh, for the areas that they were working in: the community, drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, capacity, infrastructure, and finance group. Came back with five recommendations, and one was to create a water infrastructure uh, projects authority, and that was with the intent of a dedicated funding stream that would provide communities with the resources and support they need to help them meet their needs and adapt to ongoing changes. And this is everything from from funding planning, funding, and the whole 9 yards. Um, Second one was to promote and incentivize regional collaboration, working with systems to learn to work together, help each other. Uh, Systems, like people, all have their own strengths and weaknesses, and oftentimes they can help each other by feeding off each other's strengths. Address capacity challenges through technical assistance and workforce development. Um, Again, that's funding for training and technical assistance to put boots on the ground out in the field working with small and rural water and wastewater systems. Targeting funding to address emergency needs. Oftentimes, systems and small communities have an emergency, and it could be anything from a fire to a well going out or a well going dry. When those things happen, oftentimes the whole community's out of water. Uh, it takes, as most of you know, they're involved in this industry. It is a very long process uh, to obtain financing and funding uh, to to put in a new well, to drill a new well, to meet whatever is needed in case in an event of emergency. So to the idea here is to have funding that's targeted to address emergency needs and is available and can be accessed very quickly. And the final one is to grow the water workforce. It's estimated that some 10% of water operators in New Mexico and across the entire country will be retiring in the next 10 years. We already have a shortage of water and wastewater operators, so that problem, if we don't do something about it, will only be compounded as time goes on and we move forward. Water Resources Management and Planning Group came back with 5 recommendations, and one was to equip state agencies to help address water security challenges, primarily the Office of the State Engineer, Interstate Stream Commission, and the New Mexico Environment Department. The 3 agencies that are more closely tied to immediate water security challenges. Elevate water planning to affect reductions in water use over the coming decades. That's working with agencies to do longer term water planning, regional water planning, to help look forward in regional areas, look forward to what they're going to be looking at down the road as far as water availability and what are we going to do it. How do we need to adapt to address what we believe is going to be coming at us? Support the resilience of New Mexico agricultural communities with effective water rights administration. Again, that's working with the state engineer's office to have more effective water rights administration and more stability in our agricultural communities. Improving monitoring of groundwater. That's something that's been worked on. There is New Mexico Tech has a good groundwater monitoring program that they've been working on for quite a number of years now and are expanding more. And that's something that needs to be increased and improved on. And capitalize a new state fund to capture and leverage federal funding. So many of the federal funds require a matching funds, and if the state would fund some of the matching funds for particularly small and rural systems, it would help. It would help them get into funding faster and more effectively. And lastly, the River Aquifer and Watershed Group came back with recommendations to fund and staff strategic water reserve and river stewardship programs. And uh, fund New Mexico Environment Department to take over surface water quality regulation. We're one of 3 states that uh, does not do uh, what am I trying to say here? Um, we're one of 3 states that does not monitor the wastewater end of our water and wastewater systems. EPA it has done that for us because the state chose not to do it in the past. If they would choose to do that and take that over, it would bring it to a local situation where it's more. Uh, uh, thank you, Tom. It's we do Environment Department does not have primacy over wastewater. Is one of the things I was trying to think of. So
Mhm.
at any rate, local is better oftentimes with these regulations because different states have different needs and different ideas, and improved monitoring of groundwater, which is a sort of a universal thought between all 3 of these was the groundwater situation. Uh, the task force also was asked to take a look at the 50-year water plan, recommend top priorities uh, for action out of that plan, and the 5 top things, I guess, that they came out with was to protect groundwater health, uh, improve our upland water health. That's something that we've seen issues with both after the Mora fires and recently the fires in the Ruidoso area. Uh, if we don't take care of our watersheds and do what we can to minimize the effects of fire and other things and minimize the effects of what happens after a fire when you have rain and runoff and ash uh, washing down into our rivers and lakes. Um, it causes substantial many problems for us, and some planning and work could go a long ways to alleviating that to a certain extent. Continue to innovate in water conservation, um, which is an ongoing thing everywhere throughout the entire state. Modernize our water infrastructure, our small and rural water and wastewater systems. Uh, Many of them have been able to make some uh, good ground on replacing and refurbishing their water systems, but we still have many water systems out there that the distribution lines or the wastewater lines are 50 years old or more, and and with that comes leaking. It's things aren't as efficient. It costs more repairs. So we do need to modernize our infrastructure so that we can operate more efficiently as we move forward, and modernize administrative practices for water. That's the way the state looks at things and tries to regulate the way water is used. Uh, Legislative outcomes support in enhanced upland watershed protection. Uh, there was some good activity on that. Forest Conservation Act amendments, forestry division procurement, protect and bolster groundwater supplies. OSC, ISC got some funding for Lower Rio Grande aquifer projects, Rio Grande and Colorado interstate settlements, things like that. Improve river systems, um, uh, move to uh, create legacy permanent fund, uh, recurring to NMED's River Stewards Program, recurring forest land protection revolving fund, addressing aging infrastructure. OSC got some money for dams statewide, and Acequias got some money. There was some money that came out for water and wastewater systems then and now. Uh, there's a breakdown between large systems, cities and large systems, and the small and rural water and wastewater systems. Uh, Funding for these systems comes out at different times during the year. Much of the funding is limited to set dollar amount. Larger organizations and the cities have people that do nothing except look for funding and work on funding and plan for funding, and they're always first in line uh, on the various funding programs, regardless of when they come out. Small and rural systems, it takes them longer to get things pulled together because they are oftentimes totally volunteer. Um, uh, so as a result, they wind up uh, coming in at the end of the line. I'd like to see some split in some of the funding between what's going to go to larger systems, what's going to go to smaller systems, to equalize that out a little bit so that smaller systems have a better opportunity to come in, get in line when there's money available, and get funding for infrastructure. Transform regional water planning. Both OSE and Interstate Stream Commission are working on those things, making communities more resilient, respond to emergencies. Um, uh, I'm going blank. I can't remember what happened on that, but there has been some gains on emergency funding and that's available now that was not available back 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, uh, for water systems in need. And cultivate the next generation of water use leaders. Um, that's an ongoing problem, drawing people into the water and wastewater industry. New Mexico Rural Water Association has an apprenticeship program that we instituted several years ago that's coming along pretty well. Most difficult problem that we have is matching apprentices with systems and location in the state. So if any of you have are with systems that would like to visit about taking on the apprentice, having an apprentice come up and learn the water or wastewater programs uh, with your community, please give me a call. Let us know. We would love to visit with you about it. Future opportunities, things to ponder. There's everything that we've covered today is still an opportunity for the future. Uh, we've made gains in some areas, not so great gains in some areas, but we uh, are continue to work, continue to plan, and continue to try to do things to help improve uh, the abilities and the life of these small and rural water systems. These folks work awfully hard. I think it's an absolute tribute that we have had no illnesses that I'm aware of in the state in years for people getting sick from water. So they do a remarkable job. When you see your water operators and wastewater operators and boards, congratulate them, tell them you appreciate them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Andrew has some thoughts to share with us next.
Very good. Well, big thanks to Bill and Blanca for really setting the stage for the thoughts that I'm going to be sharing with the group. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how there's this, it's a hydrologic and a social conundrum that we have in front of us, and trying to find the pathway to give our local communities, especially our rural communities, more capacity to meet the challenges in front of them is a huge endeavor, and it's going to take all of us working in various facets of that search for solutions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a legislative effort that was passed in 2023, the Regional Water System Resilience Act, and then also talk a little bit about the New Mexico Finance Authority's Technical Assistance Program, which is trying to be a bridge to help grow that workforce, that water workforce that Bill was eloquently talking about, and then ruminate a little bit throughout these comments on pending recommendations. So Next slide, if you will. So jump right into it. Again, here's a map of the 650 public water systems in the great state of New Mexico. In 2023, after what I understand was 15, 20 years of effort, this legislation was passed, and it really goes towards what is a national assessment, which is one of the best sources of sustainability for our water systems is consolidating and having, instead of six boards of six individuals per board that are managing their six smaller water systems, consolidate them and have one umbrella organization managing with a board of six instead of what would it be 36 people. So looking for efficiencies. There's all sorts of flavors. We didn't really cover it much, and I won't this evening. But in concept, there's all sorts of flavors of regionalization, and that's really my primary task. Working for the New Mexico Environment Department now for 6 months. I should have mentioned that in my introduction, that I'm a new hire and trying to get my arms around the drinking water universe. But there's everything from very informal resource sharing, allowing one entity to use a tractor, have another entity provide water in times of emergency, into the middle range of regionalization, having more contractual agreements where you're having one water operator serving four or five entities, water systems, and then all the way to the much more formal end of the spectrum of regionalization, which is what we're really focused on in this SB1 Regional Water System Resiliency Act. So in essence, two or more entities can come together and organize under this act. They're referred to as the founding or joining entities. And then they become a political subdivision, and they can go after public funds, which is hugely important. That was one of the most important aspects of the mutual domestic water conservation associations that was formed by the SPA, as Bianca mentioned, is you have a opportunity to go knock on Santa Fe's door and ask for public assistance. And it doesn't matter if you're a mutual domestic, a village, a city, county, water, sanitation district, but the act allows all these different entities to collaborate. So the regional entity that gets formed, you can not just provide water and wastewater services, which are obviously critical. Those are kind of the primary services that are being provided to the community, but the act allows them to do complete road improvements for the protection of the infrastructure. So that's a really important additional capacity and authority that comes. And we can look towards the future and more innovation. I saw there's an innovation and conservation note in the chat. So looking at renewable energy projects to try to help the efficiency and effectiveness and cost of running these water systems. Absorb or including the powers held by an entity forming or joining the authorities is an incredibly important component of SB1. Where the entities that are going to be joining, they all have their own assets and their own liabilities, and so the new entity that is formed after consolidating the smaller entities owns all of the above. So that's a critical aspect, which is oftentimes a legal conundrum that can't be fixed outside of this legislative pathway. So go on to the next one there, Norm. That's fine. So major benefits that are hoped to be derived from the SP1 is, this large one is decreasing these operational costs through the consolidation. So you're starting to see a national consensus. The economics of scale, economies of scale are one of the most important components. So we end up having more efficiency. We're able to have more capacity at the local level. And that really translates into really empowering the board of supervisors who are running these water systems to play their role in governance and leadership and vision and setting the stage for what's coming down the pipe, as opposed to having all their volunteer hours consumed with day-to-day activities, which really is a business model that's very difficult. Go back to the slide prior, please, for a second. So yeah, also the act is really primed to try to help improve the financial capacity for maintenance of these systems, and not only to talk about infrastructure that's oftentimes 50, 60 years old and failing in many instances, but also this incredibly important nugget of having enough financial capacity to hire professional staff. So this shift to this business model with paid staff is really, what I was making reference to before, was allowing the board members to take more of a powerful role. So next slide, please. So this increase in capacity really, allows these additional opportunities to have more of this long-term viability, stimulating local economic interest. All of this is kind of binded together. There's many spokes that are emanating out of our small communities that really have, safe drinking water is one of the most important components for economic growth in any area, and it's hard to sell houses if you can't promise that there's going to be a reliable supply of safe drinking water. And then there's also the opportunity to again look forward and have these implementation of initiatives that promote resilience as we're facing climate change, all towards this ensuring healthy and sustainable regions. Next one, please. So that's a quick overview of SB1. Before I leave that topic, it's an early stage. One of my primary tasks is to try to connect some dots between different agencies, whether it's OSE or ISC or NMFA, and take some of these SB1 entities out for a test drive and see if this is in fact the model that we're seeing. Other states around the country are doing similar, but New Mexico in a lot of ways is showing a level of creativity that really we have a lot of eyes on this state. So I'm really hoping that people on the New Mexico environment team are able to really make a big difference here. But it takes a village. There's so many different components, and I think one of the biggest components, one of the things that really connects solutions to be meaningful and sustainable for these water systems is the workforce component. Again, echoing Bill's statement about growing the water workforce is one of the most critical components. Having these rural counties that are losing some economic vitality, losing some population, have a real economic perspective where you're able to start providing real living wage jobs to professionals and operators, office professionals, administrators, and the whole nine yards. And so now enter a brand new, just has been put on the streets earlier this year in 2025, effort on the part of the New Mexico finance authorities to do this technical assistance program, where they're really pushing to have 5 primary support services that will be meaningful to all the water systems who are on the call to this evening, and having a free to the water systems approach where companies will have applied for these different 5 features, and then the water systems can then also apply. I'll cover that in just a moment, but the 5 primary support systems are engineering, technical, and hydrologic services. So these PERs, the preliminary engineering reports, are super important and burdensome. That would be one of the products that could be developed out of this tab, including the asset management plans, which is an absolute criticality to have the AMPs properly built and utilized. And that's one of the most important components to a functional water system. Going to the second item, geospatial mapping needs. Bianca talked about how one of the interesting aspects of water systems placement is some of them are very close to each other, but we really don't. A lot of them we've kind of lost through the passage of time where their water lines are located. So this issue of proximity of different water systems, water lines is an important criteria for whether or not that these systems are good candidates for more formal form of regionalization, like is endorsed by SB1. So a lot of geospatial stuff. Accounting needs are critical, as everyone can appreciate. So not only financial plan development, but also one of the most challenging aspects with bringing our water systems into a new future is debt consolidation and debt forgiveness. I've been told that a lot, there's a lot of water systems that are still holding on to many-year-old USDA rural development loans, and it takes an act of Congress to forgive a federal loan. So is there a way to make progress on that front? Easier for state government loans in a big way than it is for federal government loans to be forgiven. And then all of this has aspects of legal components, legal services being needed. So, whether you're doing the dissolution and or merging of existing entities, the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, all the aspects of the real estate transactions, all those things, including the whole conundrum of water rights and how those parts of the given entity's portfolio are managed and protected. Having credible water attorneys on hand is always been a real limiting factor in New Mexico. There's not nearly enough legal support to really meet the need. And then going to more of a social component of facilitation and making sure that the benefits and the pathways towards achieving some of these benefits are brought to communities and you have the cuss and the discuss about what are the pluses and minuses of losing an entity that's very proud of what they've achieved and the cultural designation that their water system represents to these volunteers and their community members. How do you square the circle to say, well, we want to have a secure future where your children, your grandchildren are being supplied dependable sources of safe drinking water, and there is again this emerging perspective that consolidation is probably one of the best ways to achieve that matter. So facilitation is really important. I have some updates directly from NMFA that I thought I'd share with you. From opening up the request for proposals back in January, now they've received 12. The window closed. They've received 12 submitted proposals from companies, and just a couple days ago, one of their committees, the Financial Disclosure Committee, approved advancing 8 of those 12 submittals that covered all of those 5 on-call services I mentioned a moment ago. So the next step is to take those 8 proposals to the full NMFA board, and then the finance authority will then go into negotiations with those companies with contracts expected by somewhere around mid-April. And then the final and the most important step, and the one that's most relevant to the people on the phone today or on the call today, is soliciting letters of interest from the drinking water systems to receive these on-call services. Again, it's going to be a tax-based approach where there's not going to be a cost to the individual systems. So this is another car that's getting taken out of the factory for its first drive, and it may represent one of those bridges that really takes us to this next chapter in the state's history. More questions on this, go to their website, www.nmfinance.com, or contact Donnie Quintana at nmfa.net, dquintana@nmfa.net. He's my source of information. He's been a real driving force to try to stand up this TAP as an approach for again, trying to be a bridge to connect the needs of the water systems to in-state skill sets that aren't being fully utilized in the private sector. So that's what I have to share with you good people.
And I believe that that Bianca's going to wrap it up, and then we'll go into questions.
Yes. Norm, could I share one slide that I forgot to put in? Let's see.
Please share it yourself, Bianca.
Yes. Are people seeing my screen? Yeah. Right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the whole equity versus equality. I think we have seen this. Many people have seen this. And when it comes to small water, the whole water utilities, they're created equal. 15 connections or more is a public water system, right? But they are, equality, it's there for everyone. I would say that there is equality when it comes to funding, right? The funding is there for everyone. There's a little bit more added, to small systems. No, right? It's like it's available for everyone. So there is the funding. There is the issue of regulations. They're the same for everyone. The regulations, the regulatory compliance doesn't say, if you're this size, and it shouldn't, right? That it should be the same for everyone. Every family should have safe drinking water. And then the administration, the technical, managerial, and financial, requirements, that's the whole administration, operations, and maintenance of water systems is the same for everyone. It's, it requires the planning, their whole resiliency issues of response, the having the administrative, all the reporting requirements are the same. So there is that equality, right? So then how do we build equity? And that's the big question here is like, how do we build equity in there? And that's what the regionalization is meant to be, because it's like, there's been nationally, the state, you can see in the presentation that Bill did, what are we going to do in terms of, equity here for small systems? Because what happens is the size of the system that creates that, that inequality issue, that equity issue, right? It's like you can't under, 10 families or 15 families or 20 or 30 or 40 be able to do what, a large system is and it's doing, or so that's where we need to build the blocks, right? Come together, 2 or 3 of us come together. And in my experience as an assistance provider, I always, when I did rates, which I did rate studies and do rate studies where, we still do them at RCC, I did rate studies with many of you. And I would say once we reach 100 connections, you can start seeing the difference. Then it's like, well, you can pay the billing person, you can pay an operator, you can, at 100 connections, I saw a big change from, some systems, some examples of systems that merge, 3 systems merge and they almost reached to 100 connections, but then soon they were paying an operator. So you can see that, the affordability issues changes when you aggregate and you're able to, and the finances are amazing. They say a lot. So then we can go, any questions about this, but this is more or less, to me, it shows what regionalization means. What are we saying? And regionalization, it doesn't mean that you're going to, connect pipe only, or that you are going to have to give up your autonomy. It means aggregating, right? And that's what I wanted to talk to you next. So let me stop sharing and go back to Norm with the slide that he was presenting, because there is an umbrella association. This is what we're calling a regional technical assistance center, right? It's the communities. It's we try to illustrate it. We have a colleague who illustrates this really well. The communities are there. That doesn't change anything. Then the name of the water systems, right? All the different mutual domestics. This is in house. And then, they exist there. They don't have to cease to exist if that's not what the community or the board wants to do. But they can create that umbrella entity, what we're calling a regional technical assistance center, meaning all of them are going to aggregate their services, the billing, the office space, have a place to store inventory, right? It's like meters and all that, buy in bulk, but all from one center. And the reports, all the reports are done at one center. It's not one person, when you have to do the one report a year, it's very hard for somebody to remember, oh, I have to send this report or quarterly. But if you have a center doing it, they know that in May, they have to do all the Secretary of State reports for everybody, get them done. And they have to do, the audits. They have to do the ICIP and all that. And so in a center, there is that administration that is happening. So that's what we're calling a regional technical assistance center, which could be an SB1 entity. And that's the SB1 entity that gets formed, and people start coming in and accessing, administrative services that everybody takes advantage of, because everybody pays to it, and then you can hire somebody, and that goes to that local workforce. Somebody can make a living, because right now when you hire somebody, you pay them $100 or $200. People cannot make a living with that. But if they're going to be doing it for multiple systems, they can make a living, and they can probably stay in the community and have a job there. Same for operators, but it's the operator or, for that region, and they, they help each other. So that's the proposal that's in front of you with this, equity building. So now we want to hear from you to see what questions do you have or examples.
Thank you, panel. That was a lot of information, great information, and it's encouraging to me to see that an area of endeavor that is critical to the future of the state is getting independent attention and has its independent advocates and leaders and participants. I mean, you're all here tonight. So thank you for panelists for putting this on. And now we're going to go to questions. And again, I want to say a few words about the legislature's outcomes for water at the end, but we want to give full measure to the questions. So I won't call time on questions until we run out of steam, or 8 o'clock, whichever comes first.
Thank you,
Thank
Norm.
you.
We had some great questions in the chat. I'm going to start with a few of the later ones because they're related to what we just heard about. But Blanca, could you give us some examples of regionalization projects that have actually occurred across the state?
Sure. There's several examples. One, I can give. There's a couple that we're forming in Taos right now that they wanna be SB1 entities in Taos County, and they're coming together to build resiliency. It's resiliency, it's the whole preparedness that it's that they want to do. They also want to provide services to other small communities around them, so that they become that assistance center locally. And that does not mean that, assistance providers like us will go away. Not at all. But we can come in and help with planning and, and train at a one location, which will be great, because with over 600 systems, there's not enough of us. I think, Bill, you agree with that. And Andrew, it's like, there's not enough of us to go to individual systems. But if we have these hubs, that will be great. There is one of those that exists right now, and it has existed for several years. And it's called El Valle Water Alliance in San Miguel County. And they are a technical assistance center. They serve almost every system in San Miguel County. They do billing for some. They do operators for others. They do maintenance for some systems. They do funding applications and funding management for some systems. And some of the systems say, we can't find, volunteers to be on the board. We want to merge completely into El Valle. And they have. The communities vote for that, and they are taken care of by that El Valle Alliance. There is also the big one in Doña Ana County, the Lower Rio Grande, that And you know, the Doña Ana Mutual Domestic is one of those that, you know, that they provide billing for some, they provide operators for others, and some systems they, you know, merge into Doña Ana Mutual Domestic and or the Lower Rio Grande down south. Um, Bill, do you have some examples too that are operating like that?
You've pretty much covered them, I think, Blanca, that are doing it to any extent.
Yeah, and some of them have merged completely. Like, you know, in Glorietas, we have the three Glorietas. I saw somebody from Cerro here in the room. Cerro used to be three water systems, and Cerro East, Cerro West, and then El Rito across the street from them, and they are one system, you know, one Cerro Regional. And so there is several like that where there was a lower and upper, and they have merged to come together.
I want to get as a kind of a newcomer. I found it really interesting how, you know, regionalization is not a new concept. We're 52 years away from the report that Blanca talked about in 1973, highlighting all these challenges that are hitting our small rural water systems, and we're still
Mhm.
struggling with many of those same challenges. And at least one of the most instructive experiences I see is the one that you made a reference to, Blanca, which is the Lower Rio Grande, which is now the Public Water Works Association,
Authority,
right?
authority, I think, yeah.
Authority, right? Authority, where if I have my numbers right, it's like 16 ended up forming one entity, and they've professionalized their workforce. They've cleaned up some challenging, you know, hydrogeologic issues with arsenic and other water quality challenges, but it took them 15 years. And so that's one of the driving force behind SB1 is let's see if we can't give a pathway to reduce some of the barriers that take so much time and effort to get these consolidations and these ways of partnering formally to move in a more quicker, effective manner. I'll note in the conversation in the chat there's a question: is there resistance to these consolidations? And again, I've been in this story for 6 months, and clearly there has been. I can't delineate how many, but there's a lot of concern about what's the phrase you don't want to utter when you go into a water system? I'm from the government. I'm here to help. How are your water rights, right? I mean, there's some really well-earned pieces of concern for how these entities are going to lose control over their future, and they're going to lose some of their cultural identities. But we really, you know, those of us who are really pushing regionalization right now really see that there's a whole spectrum of ways to improve your reality. And Bill, you've talked to me quite often about start small. Maybe consolidation is too much too much too quickly at this point in the conversation. Let's establish some of these sharing mechanisms and do some stuff on the low level contractual work to get the systems more accustomed to working together. But I just think, you know,
Ros
we really want to move forward and continue to test out this new vehicle and see where the challenges are and what we continue to work at and revise and make better.
I was going to add that Roseanne Gallegos mentioned the Mora Water Alliance, which is doing that, right? They're not consolidating, they're not, you know, but they are working together to do from one hub all their reports and help each other. And the other issue with encountering resistance is come from trust, right? Lack of trust. They don't know each other. People know each other in church and all that, but they may or may not know that they're in the board of a water system and or how the water system operates. And one of the programs that we're hosting is a Water Leaders Institute all over the state. You probably hear one coming near you or happening near you. And that's the idea, is that, you know, leaders from the water communities will come in together and share each other how they're doing and solutions and build that trust.
Let me
So
switch
come
to
up with
another.
local solutions. Mm-hmm.
Let me switch to another question. There's a question in the chat that is very much like a question that I had. And let me just read it. Regional planning councils, and this is referring to the Regional Water Security Planning Program. Regional water planning councils are expecting technical support on their respective hydrologic situations. How can or should the NMFA Technical Assistance Program coordinate with the ISC to supply this technical need? And Andrew, I think you did a little bit of thinking about that and some research. Could you take that first?
Yeah, my research didn't give me a whole lot of dividends, so I'd love to have Bill or Blanca include their thoughts as well. But what I say it's a logical point of connection. I mean, what NMFA TAP is going to be doing is bringing private sectors resources to be this bridge to help local water systems develop and have all the requisite pieces of the puzzle so they can be more effective in competing for scarce resources. So you got to have the right plans in place. You got to have your emergency plan. You have to have your asset management plan. You have to make sure that your audits are clear, or you can't compete for public funds. So there's that whole piece of you're bringing company who do this kind of work into these communities to help them hit those five major sectors. Well, I think the Interstate Stream Commission's approach is has a very different perspective, right? And as I understand it, it hasn't lifted off yet. It's still conceptual, but it's really trying to have more of a regional base of these points of expertise. So, and trying this has to be a statewide solution. All the things we talked about this evening are fall apart if we don't cover all four corners of the state. And as was articulated, the equity of the big, rich metropolitan areas is really a challenge in rural New Mexico. So I think that's part of at least the philosophical grounding for ISC's approach is let's grow these regional centers so we have good spatial coverage across the entire state.
Right. Well, what I see right now is that the rural water systems, the small water systems of New Mexico are struggling with their business model, as you've discussed extensively. And on top of that, we have these severe lack of sustainability issues with the way we're overusing our water and really not managing it. And the ISC's technical support program, which is called for in the Water Task Force report, is to provide technical assistance on hydrology and on data and on those aspects. And what we have to keep in mind, in my view, is that down the road, these two paths have got to be merged so they become one. We're not going to solve rural New Mexico's water and wastewater and safe drinking water problems with only infrastructure when we are not taking care of our basic water resources sustainably.
Agreed.
Norm, most of the hydrological, if I can spit it out here, research that's being done is being done by New Mexico Tech and has been historically here. And they do have a good program that they started some years back. New Mexico Rural Water helped them get it started and get their foot in the door with systems to monitor wells around the state. And they are still doing that. And any systems that would like to participate in that, I believe you can still call uh, uh, New Mexico Tech and request that, and somebody will get back with you. And if they have the equipment to do that, they will probably come out and install a monitoring unit because the more they're trying to get them in as many places as they can around the state, because the more information they can draw around the state, the better off we're all going to be. And then they funnel that information back to ISC and OSE.
Right, thank you. Brittany, could you go on to next questions?
Yeah, how do we preserve the historic value of small systems when really the best option is for them to consolidate for the economies of scale?
Mhm. Um, I can take a little bit of to that one is preserving the value. One of the things that I'm going to say is that, the same issues of finding volunteers to the board and finding the local workforce, it's there even in, communities that are, merging or consolidating or just collaborating in one of the benefits. So there's no outsiders coming in to manage the systems. It's still by local people. So one of the benefits of when you have a merger of 3, 5, and all that is that you needed 15 board members or 30 board members, or in the case of those that have 12 or so, or 100 board members, and now you can have 5 or 7. It's still local people, but they are preserving and they're representing everyone, and they're still in the community, so it's nobody from the outside. And also the other way to preserve it is the local workforce. It's local people now have local jobs, and they have told us, the people we have talked to, about now I don't have to commute for hours to go to work. Even some people said, I don't even want to work in Los Alamos when I can make more money. I'd rather be home for my kids, for my family, and working very close to my community. And those people keep and preserve, the history of the community. They're very protective, and they love working in their community, but now they can make a living because there is an aggregate of, resources that came, and they can have a job. And so that's the feedback we have gotten from communities, plus the ability to be able to manage projects and move projects. Before, they were getting 50,000 from the legislature, 100,000, and it wasn't enough. But once they become bigger, somebody's managing those projects, they can ask for multiple sources of funding and then get all the funding together to build projects in communities. And the local people decide, you know how many projects are we going to have this year, and where are our priorities, and they set criteria. And that preserves also their autonomy, and then their solutions, they are solving it themselves. It's nobody from the outside, and they are able to have. And if you look at the funders list, those regional projects have projects funded every year. Every year they bring funding to the region, because there's somebody in an office, moving all that, doing project application, RFPing for engineering services, project design, project construction. And that, so that also preserve, their history and their customer service, and that connection to community, because they see construction happening in their region every year. So it's very visual.
Thank you. We had a question about if the consolidated entities are also able to share their water supplies. We talked a lot about how they can share resources other than water, but do they actually share their water rights and water supplies?
Yes, one of the key components of SB1 is your liabilities and your assets all get merged into the newly created umbrella authority. And so there is a consolidation of all those assets, and nothing gets lost, nothing gets taken away. I mean, you talk to the Office of State Engineer, and they're saying there are instances where you're going to have a change to your water rights if your well gets underutilized, and you're not using all the water you once did, or in instances where if you're going to combine sources and you're going to use a well more frequently than you did prior, but the water right needs to be augmented for that additional use. But I think it's safe to say that there's no intent to take any of the assets away, but to manage it at the consolidated level.
And in terms of what you just spoke about from the Office of the State Engineer, are they doing consolidated permits for those water rights? Where, any well can be used for any of the volumes that any of the water rights brought into the system had?
My understanding is that that's a one-on-one conversation with the OSE. It all depends on the particulars of the instance, but there's no reason to. I mean, what I heard from them, and this is from the deputy state engineer Tanya Trujillo, is that they are 100% behind being supportive and not being a stickler on too many rules and regs. They want to find a pathway to help our water systems regionalize and become more stable and more sustainable. So I think we'd see a pretty open-minded set of engineers. But at the end of the day, what your water right has pretty core components. What's the point of use? What's the point of diversion? What's the return flow component?
Mm-hmm.
What's the beneficial use? All those things are not changing in the context of regionalization, but you have to view it in the context of what's that new entity's water use is going to look like, and what water portfolio do they now have to manage?
Thank you. What major bottlenecks do you see for water security in rural New Mexican communities?
Uh, I had something specifically on that here, but I don't know where it is. Uh, water security is basically all encompassing. Um, it's managing our surface waters, our groundwaters, uh, uh, managing our wastewater systems so that we're protecting the quality of our groundwaters, um, and our source water for our drinking water. Uh, and I think just simply improving what we're doing now and improving what the state has been doing between state engineer's office and ISC, uh, uh, working on uh, working on water use versus water availability in different areas. Better planning, I think, is the key to it, and it's going to take some funding to meet some of these things, because part of the issues with water security is in 50-year-old water lines, you're going to have a whole lot of water leaks. And with those water leaks, it may be going back into the aquifer, but it's costing a lot of money to produce the water that and treat the water that is eventually being leaked out through the distribution system. So it's there's a lot of different components to it, and I think all those components both need, especially with the state engineer and ISC, they need some funding to accomplish what they need to do, and some staffing, I'm sure, to accomplish what they need to do. But we also need funding uh, to alleviate the inefficient uh, infrastructure that many systems are dealing with at the present time.
Thank you, Bill. That was a good segue to our closing, which I think I'm going to go into now. And I would call everybody's attention to the last post in the chat, which expresses some wisdom. Thank you, Ms. King, for your thoughts there. I believe we have some other slides to show, perhaps. Brittany?
I think you are going to do your legislative update and what you see as our pathway for 2025, and then we can do our closing slides.
Okay. Well, I had hoped at this point to be prepared to give you a reasonably well thought out postmortem on where we ended up at the legislature, but it's too early to do that. There were a lot of things that were funded. In my opinion, there were a lot of important things that got great funding, but I think there were some essential things that weren't funded at all. Um, and I think that this coming year is going to be one, it's going to be a critical one. But because I think all of the water agencies that have a piece of this pie need to figure out what the whole vision looks like going forward, so that independently, the state engineer can pursue his regulatory mission to comply with compacts and administer water so we don't run out. We need all of the assistance that has been the subject of tonight's discussion to equalize the playing field for the small systems. You know, the great proportion of New Mexico's population that doesn't have professional people working around the clock to take care of their water. We have to take care of those inequities, and it's all going to take resources. But what I see at this time is that the legislature has not yet grasped the urgency and the depth of the statewide problem that we face. Like Ms. King's comment in the chat just noted, this kind of is a hierarchy of needs issue. You know, when rural New Mexico doesn't have a workable business model to keep safe drinking water supplied to rural water system connections, that has to be taken care of before we can figure out how to make those systems and the supplies sustainable. But the problem is we've neglected these problems in New Mexico for so long, really not facing them, that now we have to figure out how to do a whole bunch of things at once. And I think it's going to take a lot of goodwill on the part of people who want to find the goodwill in others so that we can truly collaborate and work together, because otherwise we're not going to have water safety, you know, which is provided by sound infrastructure and sound operations. We're not going to have water sustainability, which is provided by matching demand with the renewable supply or some approximation that's much better than what we're doing now. And we've just got to figure this out. And so time's a wasting. And we hope that you will come. Okay, so here's now the next part. We will have a legislative workshop that will be thoroughly researched and presented on the third Thursday evening in April. I believe the date is April 17th. And we don't have speakers confirmed tonight, but we're working on those, so check back with us. We will have another workshop that will feature the state engineer's office in May, with a focus on the compact compliance emergency in the Middle Rio Grande. You know, we have an emergency in the Lower Rio Grande that is in litigation. Well, we have a pending new emergency in the Middle Rio Grande that's going to require a lot of attention. So that's going to be our May program. And in June, we're going to hear from a noted national groundwater expert about the value of our groundwater and our aquifers as infrastructure and as a precious resource that we have to understand thoroughly and manage, instead of just assuming that it's going to be there for us in the future. So that's what I have for you to look forward to. Please come to our legislative workshop, because we're going to be talking about not only what happened, but what we need to do in 2025.
Thank you so much, Norm. As Norm just described, that's the first do your part action item, is to come to our next workshop. If you haven't yet seen our new website, we really hope you'll take a moment to check it out. We're very excited about all of the really interesting and informative articles that you can find, as well as some of our standard content that can give you a lot of education about the general issues in New Mexico, our current crisis, and the solutions that we see for that crisis. So again, if you haven't yet seen our brand new website, please take a visit. It's nmwateradvocates.org. And then finally, we're always looking for volunteers for the water advocates. And I think that's going to be even more so in 2025 as we do our best to attempt to really connect with our legislators and find a way to educate the public and our the people who lead us to find some solutions, since it doesn't seem to be at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and it really needs to be. So if you're interested in volunteering with us, you can email us at info@nmwateradvocates.org.
And I just say that we're kind of unique as a nonprofit organization because the only axe we have to grind is taking care of our water as a society, as New Mexicans. Please
Yes,
join us.
absolutely. And I want to thank our co-sponsors for helping sponsor these third Thursday workshops. Our newest co-sponsor in New Mexico Water Dialogue. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us provide these presentations. And thank you to our longstanding co-sponsors, Amigos Bravos, 350 New Mexico, Interfaith Power and Light, and the League of Women Voters. We couldn't do it without you. And we very much appreciate your assistance with these programs. Thank you again so much to Bianca, Andrew, and Bill for your presentation tonight. It was incredibly informative, and I learned a lot about the consolidation of smaller water communities and what we need to do to help our rural New Mexicans ensure water safety in the long run, and water security. If you enjoyed this presentation tonight, would you please consider donating to the Water Advocates? I'm going to drop a PayPal link in the chat if you are interested in donating. As Norm said, we are a all volunteer organization, so every little bit makes a huge difference in how much education we can provide and how much we can get to you on our website, our newsletters, and through this workshop series. We thank you again for joining us tonight, and we really hope to see you in April. Please stay tuned. You will receive an email with the recording and a link to the recording and the presentation slides. Probably that will come to you early next week, so be on the lookout for that. Please also check back on our April workshop, as we will be getting the flyer out for that shortly. Thank you again. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.